1 second. Say again?
Did you get some flowers?
One more time.
Did you get some flowers?
I don't know what you mean.
Valentine's Day.
Oh, no. No. I broached the subject with her about what she wanted to do. Did we want, she goes, I don't want to do anything. She goes, it's just another day. Okay? So we didn't do anything. Yeah. I don't know. What do you do when they say,
You go out and get some flowers. Even though I didn't.
I was kind of hoping you'd grab 2 sets so I didn't have to go out.
Good for you, not falling into
Usually my mother-in-law.
The commercialized,
the commercialized capitalistic
yes.
evil
That's
notions.
that was my stand.
Yeah, usually my mother-in-law beats me to it and then asks me if I remembered. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, stay out of it.
No doubt. You know, no need to stir that pot. But no. We watched a movie. Yeah.
You remember the name?
Not, oh, I did. I did, and I was really surprised she wanted to watch it, but it wasn't a romance movie. All right. Rates right up there with Die Hard for Christmas, you know. Where in the world? Hoofda. Well, it's a good thing I bought an OBD reader. I was working on the lights for the trailer yesterday when I got back, because it was a nice day.
Mm-hmm.
And as you let the door down on the left-hand side, that metal plate, that sheet metal plate that's kind of like a channel,
Mm-hmm.
there was several different wires in there that were just bare. You know, the insulation was cut, so it was just touching everything, you know, so I cut those out. Aaron bought a trailer, a boat trailer, without the title. I think I talked to you about this before. I'm like, oh, I told him, I said, make sure you get all the paperwork when you bring this thing home. And when he brought it home, he says, well, the guy, he didn't have the title, but he said I can go down to the courthouse and apply for one. From the day he bought it to yesterday, it's sitting in the same spot. Now he's got a bus and a mill. So I didn't even ask him. I went out there with a set of wire cutters because I didn't have, oh gosh. When your kids get older, buy them a little toolkit of their own or make them get their own and leave yours alone.
Yeah.
When they went to Northern California to visit Beck and Mike and see the redwoods, I made up a toolbox and I put wiring, you know, different rolls of wiring for the car in case something went wrong, and butt connectors and electrical tape and tools and everything else. You think I can find that? So I went to use that wire and there's no wire to be found. So just took a set of dikes and I cut all the electrical wire on that trailer, yarded it out, you know, because it's the 4-strand, just normal wiring for a vehicle. I peel back the white and spliced that all in and insulated it. And last I saw, just before I disconnected the trailer, all the running lights worked. I had to do a little work on the back lights up above because there was a grounding issue. got that, I think, fixed. And all the marker lights, and even in the front, they're all on, so fingers crossed. I had to do that for Holly wants to use it for when they move. Just wanna make sure that was all done, and I said I was gonna do it anyway, but. So I did that. But in the process of it, with one of the marker lights up above, the three in the very back, it wasn't grounded very well. I had, my test light, I had power right to it, but the light bulb wasn't coming on. Switched the light bulb, it worked over here, but not here. So I pulled the wire out, cut it a little bit, cleaned it up, then I had to get it back in that hole. What I should have done is disconnected the electrical first, because I saw arcing. Now I've got a check engine light on that truck.
Oh,
What the heck now? But that OBD reader will tell me, should
Yeah.
tell me where it is.
hopefully you just, blew a fuse.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. Especially if I get.
It's probably your aux trailer.
Pardon?
It's probably like your aux trailer hitch or trailer light fuse.
In the panel and under it.
Yeah, there's a fuse dedicated for usually
Yeah.
for the trailer plug. And I forget, I think sometimes they call it aux/trail.
Huh. Well, hopefully that's just a two-prong or not an actual plug-in fuse, but even if it's a plug-in, you know what I'm saying, a
Yeah.
square cube
Yep.
type fuse. Lesson learned. Always on the electrical before you start with the electrical. Well, we got her moved in a relatively timely manner.
Drop your pen.
Well, Paul, I really have no idea what in the world we're gonna do for second service. Valerie told me at 8:30 there was a message that Pastor and Laura were out. I looked on the men's thread and I didn't see it, so I didn't.
I dropped the ball, sorry.
Oh, it's life. I mean, I'm not complaining, I'm just saying.
It sounded
Sure.
like a complaint.
Pardon?
It sounded like a complaint.
Me? I don't complain. Much. I'm saying, I'm not sure what to do, I'm not sure what to do. Yours?
No, I believe that belongs to Sybil.
Okay. I'll throw it at her. I'll cast the first.
She is a rock collector, I believe,
I'll cast the first stone at her.
unless she's moved on from that.
I have no idea. So my sister came this past weekend, yesterday, Friday yesterday. She left today. And she showed us how to
Yeah, kind of.
play, was it Circle? It's like a tile game.
Got the phone.
It's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah?
No, because we're not that ready.
Like a board game or on the phone game?
Yeah,
No,
we're
it's
not ready
little
yet.
square tile pieces. and-
Oh, so it's a, like physical, you're not playing on your phone?
Yeah, it's hard to fathom such things as playing with physical pieces that,
Yeah.
not imaginary stuff on your electronic device.
I thought it was pretty cool. In fact,
Is it
she,
kind of a strategy kind of game?
Yeah, cause you're trying to match either the colors,
We got 6 different colors, you got, for each color, there's like 6 different symbols. So,
Mm.
or symbols, shapes, whatever you wanna call them.
so you either match it by the colors, and it could only have one of each shape or whatever, it's of the same color, or you can do the combination of different colors with the same shape. And if you align it, same shape and same color combination, you get like a triple, a double,
You get double points.
yeah.
Mm.
But then, if you wanna mess someone else up, you kinda like switch the order around, and so then they have to figure out a different way. So it kinda reminds me of, Scrabble without the letters.
Mm. Is it kind of a Asian, or is it from origins like mahjong or?
No, I don't have any idea what the origins of the game are.
Mm. The one that I'd like to learn is, what is the one with the black and white pebbles?
Moncala.
Yeah. I think that's right.
I thought it was Othello.
It's got the little depressions in the
Yeah.
board.
Yeah, and
I think that's called Moncala.
but I don't know if, some of them have depression, some of them don't. Some of them just have dedicated. Oh, okay. I think I've seen this. Yeah. How we use that. So you can match by color and shape,
Yeah,
yeah.
Anyway, last night she got me my own, set.
No, we're gonna probably be playing that for like a month.
Well, I get, if I find a new game, it's like I wanna play it over and over and over, like a marathon type of thing.
put up against a wall.
Yeah, I watched the video on it, but we'll see. I just figured I'd ask.
Yeah. You're supposed to do like, your right one's supposed to be straight and the other one's supposed to be at an angle, right? Off to the side, so it doesn't blind the other person.
If I understood correctly, you know, you measure up from the ground to the center of your headlight. And you go to a 4x8 piece of plywood up, 25 feet away. Draw that line, with a piece of masking tape. Then there's 2 adjustment points. I put new ones in on the Tacoma yesterday. And there's a way to make it go up and down and left and right. And can't remember if you, the only part I'm not sure, I mean, I can do the up and down, that's all fine, but how do, you know, where to dial in each one? Does it go to the center? Are they supposed to come to the same point? You know, I would imagine several videos will
Yeah.
at least give you a well-rounded picture, but I figured I'd ask.
Yeah. It's been such a long time since I messed with it. And I don't even know if I did it right. You sound like you know more.
Now I gotta find parts for her car. Body part.
I love Orland. That's a iguana. No, honey, iguana. Yeah, iguana. It's like, Sylvia, she wants hamburger, hangabers. We're gonna go have hangabers and fries. Hangabers. I have other requests. Friend, teacher, student, tutorials.
Just prayers for my friend who got a new student.
Who has a new student?
He's quite difficult. The newest thing is eloping out the back door 5 times a day, so that's cool.
Shoot.
Holly, one of your creams out your creams. One of them just fell. Creams, but it dropped one.
Mail one to my sister in California and
Give one a page.
share that.
I have my favorite Sydney.
Hey, you're supposed to be in Sunday school. Go see Gigi. Yes, go see Gigi.
Freya's in there.
Yeah, go see Freya and Maddie and
Orlin.
Anna. All your favorite people. Yes. Hey, go see Miss Anna. Miss Anna will show you where to go. We forgot to do her hair. Yes, I won't Miss Anna.
So what is this, about 20 weeks?
Yeah,
Oh, you're 20 weeks.
I'm 20 weeks.
That's a really important.
What?
That's a very important milestone.
Yeah, except for like that 20-week ultrasound, they couldn't get all the images. This baby is difficult. So I have to go
Are you
back.
surprised?
Not at all.
Maybe it'll be easier when it's 4.
Thanks, Julia, for your encouraging words that I
It was
didn't just create Freya 2.0. There's nothing wrong with Freya on most days. Except for the days when I text Holly that my child is driving me batty. And that I might beat her.
Yeah,
What's funny though is that she's great for other people.
that's kids.
I know.
He's also very kind.
I know. I know.
You can just
How
trade.
many times- How many times should I have to say, please brush your teeth? Right? Like maybe twice.
We're still dealing with that at 14.
Not 20 times. And then she's like, I've been counting. You asked me to brush my teeth 30 times tonight. I'm just like, I'm gonna just strangle you. Sorry, it's fine. Everything's fine.
You can just do what we do and sit on her and hold her nose till she opens her mouth. And then just do it really fast while she screams, because while she's screaming, her mouth's open.
I couldn't do that. I commend you though. Gotta do what you gotta do. I keep thinking about getting one of those like adaptive toothbrushes, you know, those that are like the little circle kind of, and you just pop them in and it.
Whatever works. I prefer torture.
I prefer torture too. Yeah. Mine's more psychological though. Me telling her I'm disappointed in her, and then she has a complete meltdown.
Everlasting torture.
Hmm.
Before you get started though, any thoughts or ideas about second service? Anybody? I guess Pastor and his wife are not gonna be here today.
Did we
They're
decide
sick.
to do second service?
Pardon?
Did we decide to do a second
I
service?
think he means main service.
Oh, main service. I didn't know he wasn't gonna be here.
They texted like last night or
Like at
On
midnight.
what thread?
The women's.
thread, I'm so sorry, I dropped the ball.
It happens. It's not an accusation. We're just,
all the Maxwells are sick.
Yeah, I think he does not feel well enough to even text, so he'd be my journalist.
I'm telling.
No thoughts from me.
no, we just, you just happen to be where we're facing, just not really. I mean, I myself cannot come up with something out of my head, I'm not that versed. So just looking for ideas.
Well, we could discuss what we've been reading in the Bible.
What book
Yeah,
was
what
it
we
that
would do on
Pastor was
Wednesdays.
trying to go through?
Buddy, I'm deaf, you'll have to speak up.
What app? That's what you mean, right, David? What app? Or what book has he been trying to teach out of?
That we're going through as far as church or main service is concerned.
really focusing on a single book.
Right now?
He's jumping around more on like morality issues and stuff like that.
Well. I haven't gone through Micah, but those are all just,
I don't know how much you have, Justin, but I've really been enjoying listening to you teach too. I've
Sure.
really been liking it.
Maybe we
But I
get
don't wanna put
double
that
lessons.
pressure on you.
Yeah. I have enough organized to do this morning, but not main
Okay.
service. Cause I have a lot written down, but I have to like
Yep.
compile what is
For
important.
sure.
important
Totally
to-
understand.
Well, it's something to think about, and then we'll address that right after this. Don't wanna cut into your time.
Okay. All right.
Everybody have a good Saturday?
Yes.
Have a good week?
Thank you all for yesterday.
Yeah.
Couldn't have done it without you, literally.
It's a cute place.
Sorry, I didn't go. I'm not
It is
on the
nice,
list
this is my
anyway.
favorite spot, my no talking, like no negative, you can come out here.
Yeah, it's a nice location. You can walk down to Bainbridge. I'd be in trouble. I'd be going to the Harbor House every day.
Yeah, Ethan thought he could walk over from our old place, now it just cuts his walk from by like a half mile.
All right. Anybody want to open this up in prayer this morning?
Father, we thank you once again for the opportunity to gather here as a body. Lord, we do lay before you the request for health and recovery for the pastor and his wife, and for Justin and his wife. Lord, open our hearts now to focus here and now, and give us guidance and direction for the second hour. Be with those that are not with us this morning, and ask that you move in their hearts, and be with them in all their needs. Thank you, Lord, again, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Trying to think.
There we go.
It's
I
a
feel
little
like that
excessive.
in my moment of vulnerability.
In your studies, why do they have multiple names? I mean, there's 4 or 5 names up there.
Usually, some of them are associated with, previous emperor and their lineage. And then, I don't know the Latin meaning of some of these names, but as they make accomplishments, they tag on, a name to denote those accomplishments. So, and then, some of them are, like Gaius is, I'd have to go back and look, but is associated with the office of emperor, I believe.
So if they become emperor, they take on another name,
Yeah.
kind of like the Pope.
Yep.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's pretty common for monarchs all over the place. I don't know if that was built on setting this as the precedent, but like I know England's monarchs take on new names and have multiple names that are titles, or at least like a hallow to their familial roots.
Doesn't that have something to do with like the distinction between them as a person and them as like
As a monarch.
chosen by God, monarchy type of thing?
Well, I had asked a while ago about Julia's name, if that was a you know, a name that's in Julian and Julia and Julian or Julius, they're all kind of like from the same root. And I guess I was looking at Wikipedia for whatever that's worth, and I guess that the J used to not be pronounced. It was actually I-U-O-L, like Yule. That was like a super, even before, like in the BC times, that was like an ancient clan that the kings kind of came out of. So Julius, the name Julius and Julia were added to family members that were of that lineage of the Yule, Ayul, whatever family, and that pops up like over several hundreds of years if you can claim that
Right.
distinction.
And if I remember right, I think that name ties back to the founders of Rome, which were, the mythology is that,
The
I
twins?
think they were twins and they were raised by a wolf.
Romulus and Remus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that why Remus is a wolf in Harry Potter?
I think so. If you look through, there's so much of that pulled from, some of these names are, the names in Harry Potter are pulled from these names too.
Yeah, and some of the names that they take on are, based on their military efforts, like Germanicus, or, we'll see that in some of the names, and those are,
Quint means 5, DC means 10, or a multiple of 10.
yeah. So,
And then there's triangle in there as well. Trey. It's 3.
It's
Or
usually
something.
try, T-R-I, but
Oh,
you might be right.
So maybe one point we could discuss in main service that I've kind of been thinking about, as I go through this study is, how using scripture, how do we determine a legitimate church? Because, some of the history of Baptist books that I am reading along in parallel with this, what they fail to mention is that, the individuals or movements that, we associate our lineage with, like the Donatists and the Novatians and the Paulicians, the founders of those movements, the Anabaptist movements, come out of this main Christian movement that, becomes the Catholic Church. And so, they come out over a series of hundreds of years. So, if we're going to claim legitimacy to the, to the apostle, to the original church, it's through that primary Christian movement. So, we have to be willing to accept that even though that the primary Christian movement was an error, oftentimes throughout, the first few centuries, we have to recognize that they still had the authority to create churches, because that's where most of our, the lineage that we draw on comes out of. So, and that's something that, some of the authors that I'm reading do not, I don't know if they're unwilling to draw that connection or they just don't mention it. They just bring up the founders and that they're Anabaptists. And they describe how they oppose the primary movement or what would become the Catholic Church. So I think that's something important to, to think about. And, maybe, I wonder, like, at what point in history did the primary, Christian movement kind of lose the candle, the Holy Spirit? And it's not for me to determine, but it's interesting to think about. And I have my opinions, and when we get into the 4th century, we can maybe discuss that a little bit. So, all right. So with that, let's do a quick review. So, anybody remember Decius? What he did?
The betrayer,
The betrayer? Yeah, who did betray?
his buddy,
Yeah,
I don't know.
the previous
The previous guy.
the previous emperor.
Philip.
Yep, Philip the Arab. So him and Philip Arab were pretty tight, and Philip sent him up north to the Danube to kind of quash the revolt and implement discipline. And the legions gave him an ultimatum: either you lead us, or you become emperor, or we kill you, and we'll find someone else. So Decius takes up the purple and goes up against Philip. And so he defeats Philip and becomes emperor. And he institutes, one of the heavier persecutions of the Christian movement. So he goes after the leadership this time. And he views the kind of regression of Rome as a byproduct of their kind of faltering on their worship to their gods. So he requires everybody to offer sacrifices to their gods, and they were issued a certificate once they completed that, going up and offering a sacrifice and claiming that emperor is Lord. And obviously a lot of Christians fell under persecution because of that, having denied that requirement. But there are also a lot of Christians and even leaders within the Christian church that lost heart and offered up the sacrifice. So anybody remember the Anabaptist movement that came out during this time?
Moldova?
And why?
Moldovia?
Isn't this Novation?
That's right.
This one.
Yeah. You remember who Novation was?
Let's see.
Is he in Alexandria?
He was a bishop.
He was a presbyter.
Oh, I thought it was a bishop.
And I believe he was a presbyter in the Church of Rome. And when the Church of Rome, after the persecution started kind of residing, a lot of the leadership wanted to come back, and offer up repentance and take back up their office within the authorities. And the bishops were willing to accept their repentance and reinstate them in their positions of authority. And Novation opposed that. And so he opposed the Church of Rome and ended up splitting out from the church and was named a heretic and an anti-pope. And so he started his own movement essentially in Turkey, and it spread down to Alexandria, North Africa. And so the Novation movement will continue on, I think, for the next 6 centuries. And so far we have the Novation and the Montanists are the primary Anabaptist movements that are existing during this period.
Do you know if they flow into one another, or do they remain distinct? Are there some that are Monatists but not subscribing to Novation?
I don't know. I looked into that, but the problem is most of the history we have of them is from the Catholic Church. So, we have bits and pieces of letters written, but yeah, I couldn't find anything that would indicate if they did or not. I imagine that. They overlapped in areas. The Monatists came out of Turkey as well, but I think the Monatists moved towards Germany and France, where the Paulicians, the Novatians moved more south. Although there were Monetists in Africa as well.
And what was the separation of the Monetists from the main church?
So the Monetists separated out because they did not, in order to battle Gnosticism and pseudoepigraphy, you know, the primary movement instituted positions of authority that oversaw multiple churches.
Oh, right.
And so the Montanists did not, they believed in a completely independent church that did not answer to authority. So that was the primary reason why
Gotcha.
Montanus started his movement. So Decius, one of his challenges were the Goths that were kind of an advancing tribe that was going up against Rome, as well as the Sassanids. And so Decius spent most of his effort battling back the Goths and was killed in battle with the Goths. So the military instituted their own emperor after Decius' death, who would be Gallus. And then alongside that, the Senate back in Rome chose Hostilian as co-emperor. So Gallus recognized that that his election was in opposition to the Senate, so he agreed to work with Hostilian and ruling Rome. So they established functional relationship. But then Hostilian killed or died, I think, shortly thereafter, a year after, and the speculation, because the Cyprian plague was moving west at this point, so they believe Hostilian fell to the plague. So then Trebonianus takes sole emperor, and he's left with dealing with the Goths and Shapur, who's the king of the Sassanid Empire. And so Trebonianus tries to establish essentially a peace treaty with the Goths, and at some point the Goths aren't satisfied with this treaty. They're looking for more funds from Rome, and Trebonianus refuses to reply. So the Goths move south on Rome, and that's when Aemilianus, one of the leaders of some of the legions in the north, confronts the Goths and defeats them utterly, and so he becomes essentially an overnight sensation. This guy here. So he's named emperor, and he marches his troops against Rome, but it's unclear exactly what happens to Gallus Trebellianus. But he's killed, so Aemilianus becomes emperor, sole emperor, but he rules for only 1 month, as he almost immediately, upon becoming emperor, marches back up to the Danube, where he confronts another revolt within the Roman army, who this other legions names Valerian as emperor of Rome. And so they clash, and Aemilianus is killed, and so Valerian becomes emperor, and almost immediately upon donning the purple, he names and elevates his son Gallienus as co-emperor. So Gallienus heads north to repel the Germanic incursion, which would occur over the next 20 years. Then, as reinforcements would be brought to the north to repeat the Germanic or repel the Germanic invasion, other regions would notice the reduction in legions and would start their incursion, causing that region to pull soldiers from other regions. So this would repeat until the local commanders would be forced to shore up their defenses, and if successful, that commander would be named emperor. So you know, at this point in history, we have these popping ups of kind of self-proclaimed emperors in different regions. So Rome essentially enters in a huge civil war. The Goths, on the other hand, waited for Valerian to pass. So Valerian's on his way to confront the Sassanid Empire, which is to the east. And so the Goths are waiting for him to pass by before they begin their invasion. So Valerian ignores them as he sees the Sassanids as a bigger threat. And so for the next several years, Valerian spends his time rebuilding Antioch because the Sassanid Empire had basically moved into Syria. And eventually in 255, the Gothic invasion became too much to ignore, and so Gallienus was forced to march east to deal with them. So he moves from essentially dealing with the Gallic tribes to towards the Black Sea to deal with the Goths. So in order to try to keep order along the Gallic tribes, the Danube, Gallienus elevates his son, Valerian II, to Caesar to deal with to allow him to deal with the Gothics. So actual administration of the province was appointed to a general by the name of Ingenuus, who will become of interest here in the near future. So in 257, the invasion of that Gallienus rushed back to deal with became serious enough that all three members of the imperial court, so Valerian and Valerian II, go to that region. And so Valerian had rebuilt Antioch at this point, and so he left the region to the charge of some of his subordinates while he headed west, but as soon as he left, the Sassanids made their move on Syria. So what made the invasion in the west so serious that even Valerian would leave one of the most important regions in Rome to go support was this rise of what's called the Franks, which are essentially the French. So the Franks are just kind of a coalescent of Germanic tribes that had finally, because up until this point most of the tribes were independent, didn't really get along, and they finally determined the only way that they're going to defeat Rome was to coordinate and join. So they coordinate and join, they become the Franks, which would then become ultimately the French people. And so they as well become a major threat on Rome. So now Rome's dealing with a front from the Franks, Germanic tribes in between France and Black Sea, and the Goths that are around the region of the Black Sea, and then the Sassanids. So four major folks that they're dealing with. So with all three emperors focused on the Franks, the rest of Rome would return to its natural state, which was chaos. The Gothics would establish a fleet in the Black Sea that would be used to invade further into Asia Minor, and eventually the emperors were able to contain the Franks, and Valerian headed east, ignoring the Gothics, as he would assign Valerian II to deal with them. And so he heads to confront Shapur and his advancing army into Roman territory. And then when Valerian reached the east, for some reason, he chose this time to revive Roman persecution on the Christians, which would lead to the death of St. Cyprian in 258. So Cyprian was the reason why we have a lot of the historical details during this time period, just because Rome was in such chaos. As we get into the next couple emperors, one emperor, there's like no existing statues. hardly any literature written about him. It just, Rome was in that much chaos that, no one, they didn't really have the time or the people to, make statues, make dedications, write history. And so,
Did he serve less time than some of the other ones that only had like 1 month?
Who's that?
That guy was there for 3 months and he had a really nice statue.
Yeah.
Well, actually, both emperors ruled for a couple years, but they were just dealing with, trying to survive, prevent the Roman Empire from falling. So,
Yeah, Valerian, 6 years, 9 months, and.
yeah, Valerian ruled for a while.
This, 15 years.
I think it's funny that the genus for chickens is Gallus, and so talk about genus and species, and so like Gallus or Gallus domesticus, that's the scientific name for chickens, and it's the same.
Yeah.
You calling him a chicken?
He looks like Castle from the movie, or the show Castle.
Like a beef, yeah.
So while Valerian was in the east opposing the Sassanids, he was eventually captured. So shortly thereafter, in 258, his grandson Valerian II died, and one of the Rome's major generals, Ingenuus, who I just mentioned, led a major revolt while dealing with the Gothics. So Gallienus then rushed over to put a stop to the revolt, which then allowed the Germanic tribes to continue advancing south into Roman territory. And at the same time, a large group of what were called Alemanni, they were also a Germanic tribe from the Upper Rhine, advanced actually directly into Italy. So they made it as far as Italy. And so this invasion became Gallienus' top priority, obviously. So he ignored all calls to go to Syria to recapture territory that the Sassanids had taken. He also ignored, requests to support the losing legions in the west against the Franks, and he also ignored requests to push back the Goths. So his primary focus was to ensure that Italy itself was not sacked. So Valerian was able to, the Valerian, not the Valerian, is it? Yeah, the Alemanni were able to raid all the way south into Rome before being pushed back by a hastily raised militia. So as they turned back north, they were met by Gallienus and were utterly destroyed. So it was the combination of these events and economic downfall that led to the breaking up of the Roman Empire, as the citizens and the Senate felt like they had been abandoned by their emperor. So the first time in over 200 years, the territory of Rome was receding on all sides. So the citizens, similar to our government, the primary function of the Roman government was to ensure the safety of its citizens, and they absolutely did not feel safe because they were, on all fronts, they were losing territory and being defeated. So almost overnight, Gallienus went from expecting congratulations from his generals for defeating the Alemanni, ruling over an empire that stretched from Gibraltar to Euphrates and from the Sahara to Scotland, to receiving letters that each of his generals had been proclaimed emperor by their troops and barely in control of Italy. In relation to the Christian movement under Gallienus, the Christian experienced a short period of peace, shifting from heavy persecution under Decius. So Gallienus issued an edict in 260 AD that allowed Christians to worship freely and to restore church property. So this would set the stage for a surge in the Christian movement leading into the 4th century. So, most, obviously, the history writings that we do have about Gallienus, are from, written by the Senate for the senatorial class. So they kind of put Gallienus on the same, same pedestal as some of the worst emperors in Rome's history, when in all actuality, Gallienus was, for what he was given, he was, historians think that he was one of the better emperors, because he was able to, prevent Rome from utterly falling. He was dealing with, confrontation on all sides of Rome and internal civil war. So here, as I said, you have these legions that are basically turning away from their emperor because he's refusing to support them, but primarily because he's trying to deal with issues back in Italy. And so they established their own emperor. So this is when the Roman Empire splits. And so we get, did I miss a slide? Oh no. So one of the first emperors that's named by the legions is Marcus Cassianus Latinus Postumus. We'll call him Postumus. And so this Gallic Empire, he established the Gallic Empire, but when he did so, he kept the Roman values and forms and ideals. So he even established their own Senate and Praetorian Guard. And so I'll show you the region that he established here shortly. But unlike Gallienus, who would show up on occasion to support the army against the advancing Germanic tribes, Postumus swore to remain along the Rhine, and so he gained the support of Britannia, the Spanish, and the Gallic provinces. So Postumus didn't want to focus on Italy. He wanted to focus on the region he was from, which was north by the Danube. So the regions, the Roman territory in Spain and Britannia swore their allegiance to Postumus. So similarly, in the east, you have this individual, Odaenathus. Oh, to go back, so this is what I was talking about. So really, the only statues we have of Postumus aren't, really, it's a kind of a generic recreation of what what they thought Postumus looked like. And this is in the Cologne City Hall, which is south of Dusseldorf in Germany. Similarly, the only really statues I could find of Odaenathus is this guy. So very little information on Odaenathus, although he was hailed as one of the better emperors of Rome. So Odaenathus was an Arab and Aramean, and he had officially ruled the Syrian and Persian territory after Valerian's capture, but was officially recognized by Rome as an independent kingdom in 262 AD. And this initiated what's called the Palamarine Empire. So Odaenathus would become one of the unique figures in Roman history, having defeated Shapur in overwhelming odds. So upon Valerian's capture, basically Odaenathus took it upon himself to gather what legions he could, organize them, and then he would go out through, he would conduct guerrilla warfare, different tactics to push back the Sassanids. And he was very successful in doing so. So Gallienus recognized the expediency of allowing Rome to officially bless this new leader of the East to make it seem as if the two men were partnered rather than rivals. So Odaenathus agreed to, basically be a co-emperor, but was ultimately kind of under the rule of Gallienus, even though they claimed independent from the main Roman Empire. There were also other generals who were also named as emperors over similar regions, such as Regalianus, whose troops named him emperor to the northern territory in the Danube province, but their positions were not recognized and short-lived. But it is an indication that just how fractured Rome was. You know, with just these pop-ups of emperors everywhere. So Gallienus would establish the Central Roman Empire with the intent to focus on Italy itself. So this is kind of what the Roman Empire looks at like at this point. So here you have the territory of Postumus, this area here. And then the area that Gallienus ruled is in purple here. So he maintains control over northern Africa, Italy, and Asia Minor area. And then I've already forgot how to say his name. Oh, it's up here. Where'd it go? Odaenathus, sorry. Odaenathus. So this is the Palamarine Empire. So Odaenathus took control over this region. And so this is the Sassanid Empire advancing. He was able to push them out of Syria and back to the east. So, in order to prevent further uprisings within Gallienus's empire and to restore relationships with the armies out the outskirts of his territory, Gallienus established the mobile cavalry. So up until this point, the cavalry unit was always linked to, a primary foot, legion. So it was always slow to respond when there was an incursion. And so Gallienus established this mobile cavalry so that it could quickly respond to invading forces before they were able to retreat. And also during his reign, the Senate was excluded from anything to do with the military affairs. So this would lead to an aristocratic class that would no longer be able to obtain military experience. So ultimately, Gallienus would establish, in a sense, an executive and legislative branch. So completely isolating the two. So if you were a soldier, you would never be able to serve within the Senate, and vice versa. So if you were a senator, you would never be able to enter in military service. So he really established the two different branches within the Roman Empire.
Is that a good thing?
Because prior to this, anyone that was in the Senate probably may have served in the military?
Oftentimes, someone in the Senate would lead a legion. So
now we're at the point where your political class is separated from the actual military personnel that are protecting. I would say that this is probably a bad thing.
yeah, from the emperor's standpoint, it's a good thing because now the military branch, like our country, answers directly to the emperor, and only the emperor.
So it's just like the Marines then?
Like our military, yeah.
All
of our
military
branches.
Answer
Well,
the president.
yeah, the president is the commander-in-chief of the military, essentially.
So, this would lead to growing hatred towards Gallienus from the senatorial class, obviously, and is more than likely why the writings from history put such a negative persona on Gallienus. So also to ensure that the soldiers remained loyal to Gallienus and would not be motivated to elect their commander as emperor, Gallienus established mints around major military outposts throughout Rome's territory. So Up until this point, Rome had only had one mint, which was in Rome. So this would ensure that Roman soldiers would be paid on time and in full. The downfall to this new monetary approach, is something that Rome was not acquainted with, but something we're very familiar with today, and that would be inflation. So as revenue failed to meet expenditures during the late 3rd century, the imperial reaction was to simply produce more money so that they could pay off all their debts, leading to a spiraling prices. Savings being wiped out, and a reversion eventually back to primitive barter and payment in kind system. Adding to these economic woes was the fact that with the imperial mines running dry and no new sources of silver and gold anywhere to be found, the emperors were forced to debase the coinage to keep up with the increased rate of production. So in the 200 years from Augustus to Severus, the standard denarius had declined its silver content from 98% to roughly 50%. And then within the 50 years from Servus to Gallienus, the silver content declined from 50% to 1.5%. So the coin essentially became a promissory note. So this was all done in secret because while the government of Rome may not have understood inflation, they did understand that the dangerous ramifications of making their coins intrinsically less valuable. But it did not take long for the people to catch on. So despite multiple imperial declarations stating that all coins should be accepted at face value, savvy merchants began adjusting their prices by the weight of their customers' coins rather than simply counting the number of coin. And even though Rome was split 3 ways and was facing economic hardship, historians agree that it was probably the splitting of the empire that allowed Rome to continue to exist against this never-ending forces that were advancing on all 3 directions. So basically what splitting the empire did was allow these 3 emperors to focus on their territory and focus on the advancing nations. They weren't motivated like other emperors, self-proclaimed emperors, to go back into Rome and basically take over the entire empire. So historians believe that it's because of this splitting up that Rome actually survived, and as we'll get into next week with the next couple emperors that come up, that it was actually miraculously able to reunite it back into one empire. So that's all I got right now. Yeah. Any comments or questions?
Just for what it's worth, and maybe you saw this, but kind of easy for me to follow along in the sense of Encyclopedia Britannica, not Wikipedia. But in dealing with Valerian's demise, I don't know if you saw that in there. It says, captured at Edessa by the Persian king Shapur.
Yeah, there's multiple versions. So some say that they stuffed his body and marched it around their empire. Others say that he was just held prisoner for the duration of his life. So it's not really clear what happened to him.
That's true, but there's a third twist here. Died in captivity, possibly forced to swallow molten gold. So for what that's worth,
Yeah. I mean, again, it's written by Rome. History's written by Rome,
Yeah.
and
But there's the references are cited in here.
Yeah.
References. But
They
I
wouldn't-
just found that most every other emperor, killed, inside jobs, whatever.
yeah,
This guy met his demise in captivity, however he did it.
right.
That's just a horrible way to go.
I mean, Rome would be motivated to makes the Sassanids out to be a brutal people. It'd be dishonorable to just say, oh yeah, he was captured and he lived out a long life as a prisoner of the Sassanids.
So what's
the difference between kingdom and empire?
Kingdom.
Kingdoms have kings, empires
Maybe a
have
landmass.
emperors.
I thought it was
Same thing.
derivative of how much land you have, because kingdoms are a lot smaller. Or is it not derivative of land necessarily?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I never,
Let's see what the internet has to say.
I would say empire is linked to,
Include
Land.
conquered lands.
yeah. Kingdom,
Is more towards like people.
Is the realm where he is,
yeah.
like
Okay.
England. The kingdom of
And
England.
Like
empire is a
Rome would be
large-
considered the kingdom of Rome,
is a large, diverse, and often forcefully expanded collection of nations
It's all land.
ruled by a single supreme authority, while a kingdom is generally a smaller, more culturally homogeneous area governed by a king or queen. So empires typically incorporate multiple kingdoms or regions, whereas kingdoms operate as distinct individual states.
So you could say even though the empire of Rome grew, the kingdom of Rome shrunk because
Mm-hmm.
Rome became so diversified.
That's what I'm seeing is similar cultures and
Cultures and
that's kind of what
ethnic.
makes more of the kingdom, and then
Yeah.
the acquisition of additional land masses and other cultures.
Whereas
make
empires
it.
are multi-ethnic or multinational.
Yeah.
That makes sense for like Mongolian
Yeah.
Empire.
Uh-huh. Well, even, Britain too. I mean, you could kind of count the US in that because we have territories that are very culturally distinct. Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands.
Yeah.
Greenland.
All right.
We're,
Not Greenland yet,
Yeah.
but maybe soon.
I don't know.
I don't know if it's a good idea.